But his maid's 3-year-old toddler did what they all couldn't. Hey, stop scrolling for a second. I sat with this story for days, turning it over in my mind, asking myself, will people even believe this? A billionaire, 38 years old, more money than most countries will ever see. 17 professional nannies, trained, certified, experienced women, all hired for one single job. 2-year-old triplets. And every single one of them failed. Not because they weren't good enough. Not because the babies were impossible. But because something was missing, something no paycheck in the world could buy. And then a maid walked through that door. Not alone. She had her little girl with her. 3 years old. Tiny hands. Curious eyes. And in one single afternoon, that little girl did what 17 grown women couldn't. Stay with me. You need to hear every word of this. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome. Before we dive in, where are you watching? I read every single one. And hey, if stories like this move you, if they make you feel something, tell stories here that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Now, let's get into this. Trust me, by the end, you will not be the same. Here's something nobody tells you about being rich. Money buys silence. But silence isn't the same as peace. Nathaniel Cole was 38 years old, and from the outside, his life looked like something people pin on their vision boards. A penthouse that sat above the clouds in the heart of the city. A private jet that knew his name better than most people did. Businesses stretching across 4 continents. Tech, real estate, energy. Nathaniel didn't just have wealth. He was wealth, the kind that gets written about in magazines with soft lighting and careful words. But inside those towering glass walls, something was broken. It had been broken for almost 2 years now, ever since the night his wife, Clara, was taken from him. She didn't leave. She didn't walk out. She was taken, suddenly, violently, in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday evening when she was coming home from buying birthday decorations. Balloons. She had been buying balloons. For the triplets' first birthday party that never happened. Nathaniel never talked about it. Not to his board. Not to his lawyers. Not to the grief counselor his assistant booked 3 appointments with appointments he canceled every single time. He handled it the way powerful men are taught to handle devastation. He buried it under work, under decisions, under the relentless motion of building more things. But at home, there were 3 small human beings who needed something Nathaniel didn't know how to give. Elijah, Ezra, and Eden, his triplets, 2 years old. Now, before you picture sweet, rosy-cheeked babies sleeping in matching cribs, let me paint you the real picture. These children were forces of nature. Elijah, the oldest by 4 minutes, had already figured out how to unlock every child-proof cabinet in the house. He didn't walk. He launched himself from surface to surface like a tiny daredevil with absolutely no fear of gravity. He once dismantled a baby monitor so thoroughly that a technician couldn't figure out how a 2-year-old had done it. Ezra was quieter, but quieter in the way a storm is quiet before it arrives. He would sit still for long stretches, watching everything, studying everything. And then, when you least expected it, he would act. A full pitcher of orange juice once appeared on the ceiling because of Ezra. To this day, nobody could explain the physics of it. And Eden, little Eden, the only girl, was the ringleader. Don't let the pigtails fool you. She had a look, a particular sideways glance she gave her brothers, and they would immediately fall into formation behind whatever plan she had decided on. She was the architect. They were her builders. Together they were chaos with dimples. Nathaniel loved them so deeply it physically hurt him sometimes. He would stand in the doorway of their nursery at night, watching them sleep all tangled together like a pile of puppies, and he would feel this enormous wave of love crash over him, followed immediately by panic. Because when they were awake, he had absolutely no idea what to do. He was a man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals. He could read a financial report in 12 minutes and find the three numbers that mattered. He could manage teams of hundreds, make decisions that affected thousands of lives. But 2-year-old Elijah looking up at him with those enormous eyes, reaching his arms up and saying, "Dada up," and Nathaniel would freeze. Completely. Like a man who had forgotten every language he ever spoke. So he did what billionaires do when they don't know how to solve something personally. He threw resources at it. He hired nannies. Not one, not 5, 17. Not because he was careless, because he was desperate. Each one came with glowing references, years of experience, specialized training. There were nannies who had worked with royalty. One had a child psychology degree from Oxford. Another had managed the children of a former head of state. And one by one, sometimes within days, sometimes within 2 weeks, they all quit. The reasons were always different. But if you listen carefully, the real reason was always the same. The children wouldn't let them in. The triplets weren't destructive with the nannies out of meanness. They were doing something far more heartbreaking. They were testing. Testing whether this new person would stay. Testing whether this new person was safe to love. Because the last person they loved and needed, the soft voice, the warm arms, the smell of home, had simply never come back one rainy Tuesday. And 2-year-olds don't have words for grief, but they have behavior. And behavior was what the triplets had in abundance. Have you ever watched a child protect their own heart without even knowing that's what they're doing? Nathaniel was watching it happen every day, and it was tearing him apart. By the time the 17th nanny handed in her resignation, a calm, professional woman named Mrs. Hargrove, who had 30 years of experience and still cried in the elevator on the way down, Nathaniel sat alone in his home office, tie loosened, head in his hands, and thought a thought that terrified him. What if money can't fix this? What would you do if you were in his place, if every solution you threw at a problem made it worse? She wasn't supposed to change anything. She was just supposed to clean the floors. Rosa Mendez had worked in service her entire adult life. Not because she lacked intelligence. Rosa was sharper than most people twice her education. She had grown up in a small town 3 states away, the daughter of a seamstress and a mechanic, raised with the belief that dignity lives in how you do your work, not in what the work is. She was 31 years old, strong-shouldered, quiet-eyed, with hands that were always moving, folding, straightening, fixing. She had worked in hotels, in offices, in private homes. She had learned early that the best household staff was invisible. You came. You worked. You left the space better than you found it. You didn't ask questions, and you certainly didn't impose. She had followed that rule faithfully for years, until her life changed in one unexpected moment and broke open in a way that left her with responsibilities she hadn't planned for and a little girl she hadn't expected to love as fiercely as her own breath. Lily was 3 years old. She was Rosa's niece, the daughter of Rosa's younger sister, who had fallen into a darkness that swallowed her whole after a difficult relationship and a string of losses. When her sister could no longer care for Lily, Rosa didn't hesitate. She filed the paperwork, found the daycare, rearranged her schedule, rearranged her budget, rearranged her entire life. Because Lily needed someone, and Rosa was someone. But daycare was expensive, and Rosa's regular cleaning job had reduced her hours. And so when an agency called her about a last-minute position, a billionaire's penthouse, good pay, flexible hours, Rosa said yes, without asking many questions. She had heard whispers about the household, of course. The industry was small. People talked. She knew about the triplets. She knew about the parade of nannies. She knew the children were difficult. What she hadn't planned on, what nobody had told her, was that she would need to bring Lily. Her daycare had called that morning. Burst pipe. Closed for 2 days. Rosa had no backup plan, no family nearby, no extra money for emergency childcare. She had called the agency in a panic. The agency had called the house manager. And somehow, with significant reluctance and a lot of formal language about it being a one-time exception, permission was granted. Rosa arrived with Lily on her hip, a bag of cleaning supplies in one hand, and a small backpack full of Lily's things on her other shoulder. She was nervous. She kept her head down, Settled Lily in a quiet corner of the kitchen with her coloring books and a small container of cereal, gave her the talk. Stay here, don't touch, be good, and got to work. Lily nodded seriously, the way 3-year-olds nod when they're only half listening. The house was extraordinary, even by Rosa's experience standards. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Marble everything. Art on the walls that probably cost more than Rosa would earn in a decade. But underneath the luxury, Rosa noticed something that no design budget could hide. The house felt hollow. Clean, yes. Beautifully arranged, yes. But hollow. Like a display home that nobody actually lived in with their whole heart. She started in the East Wing, working methodically, efficiently. She could hear the triplets somewhere deeper in the apartment, bumping and crashing and occasionally shrieking. She could hear the exhausted voice of the housekeeper trying to manage them, failing, trying again. She kept her head down. This was not her problem. She was here to clean the floors. But then she heard small footsteps behind her. She turned. And there was Elijah, having escaped whatever room they were supposed to be in, standing in the hallway in his dinosaur pajamas at 10 in the morning, staring at her with enormous, suspicious eyes. Rosa looked at him calmly. Hello. Elijah stared. You have a dinosaur on your shirt, Rosa said, going back to her work. I like dinosaurs. She didn't make a fuss. Didn't try to pick him up. Didn't alert anyone. She just kept moving her mop in steady, even strokes, and occasionally said small things out loud, to herself or to him. It wasn't clear. This floor is very shiny now. The sun is going to love this floor. After 4 minutes of watching, Elijah sat down cross-legged in the hallway and just observed her. What do you think he was looking for? He was looking for something all children look for and can't name. Whether this person in his space was safe, whether she would try too hard or leave too fast, whether she was real. Rosa, without knowing it, was passing a test that 17 trained professionals had failed, because she wasn't trying to pass it at all. Nobody saw it coming, least of all Rosa. She had finished the hallway and moved toward the main living area when she realized something. It had been too quiet from the kitchen for too long. Every parent and caregiver knows that specific silence, the one that means trouble. Rosa moved quickly, rounding the corner into the kitchen, and stopped completely. Lily had not stayed in her corner. Lily had migrated, as 3-year-olds do, following some invisible internal compass. She had found her way into the main living room. And somehow, all 3 triplets were in that room too, having escaped their designated space completely. For toddlers. Completely unsupervised. In a billionaire's pristine living room. Rosa's heart stopped. But then her eyes adjusted to what she was actually seeing, and her heart did something different entirely. Lily was sitting on the enormous cream rug, her little coloring book open in her lap. And the 3 triplets were sitting in a loose circle around her. Elijah, Ezra, and Eden, all watching her with the focused, reverent attention of a congregation watching something sacred. Lily was coloring and narrating in the serious, slightly bossy tone that 3-year-olds use when they are absolutely certain of their own authority. This is the sun, Lily announced, pressing a yellow crayon firmly to the page. The sun is happy today. The sun has a name. His name is Gerald. Silence from the triplets. Then Eden reached out one cautious finger and touched the yellow crayon. Lily looked at her. A long, evaluating look. Then she reached into her small box and produced an orange crayon, which she held out to Eden with the gravity of someone offering something precious. Eden took it, looked at the page, and very carefully, very slowly, she made one small orange mark in the corner. That's good, Lily said seriously. That can be Gerald's friend. And just like that, no training, no psychology degree, no specialist certification, just one 3-year-old girl with a box of crayons and absolutely no awareness that these children were considered unmanageable. The walls came down. Ezra inched closer. Elijah lay flat on his stomach to see the page better. Eden made another mark, and this time she almost smiled. Rosa stood in the doorway and did not move. She barely breathed, because she understood in that moment something profound, something that all the money and training and expertise in the world had missed. The triplets didn't need to be managed. They didn't need to be handled. They needed to be met. Met where they were, on the floor, at their level, without agenda or expectation. They needed to meet someone who had no plan for them, who looked at them not as a challenge to overcome, but simply as other small people. Interesting. Worth sitting next to. And Lily, who had never been briefed, never been warned, never been handed a strategy, had done it in 4 minutes with a yellow crayon. Have you ever watched a child do something that made you realize adults have completely overcomplicated the world? What happened next, Rosa didn't plan. It simply occurred to her, the way natural things do. She sat down, right there on the marble floor outside the rug, near enough to be present but far enough not to crowd them. She pulled her knees to her chest and watched. And when Ezra looked up at her, sharp, assessing look, she said simply, "I like Gerald." Ezra looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the coloring book. Then, with enormous deliberateness, he scooted approximately 3 inches in her direction. Rosa's throat tightened. She kept her face calm. It was the smallest movement in the world. It was everything. And upstairs, in his home office, something made Nathaniel look at his security monitor. He didn't know why. He had been in back-to-back calls all morning. But something, some instinct, made him glance at the camera feed covering the main living room. And he went completely still. His 3 children, his 3 impossible, grieving, guarded children, were sitting on the floor with a tiny girl he had never seen before, coloring. Calmly. Together. The little girl was talking, and his children were listening. Elijah was flat on his stomach, chin in his hands, looking at the page with an expression Nathaniel hadn't seen in months. Contentment. Nathaniel stared at the screen for a very long time. Then, quietly, he stood up from his desk. He didn't call ahead. He didn't send someone to check. He just walked downstairs himself, something he almost never did during work hours, something his assistant would have gently redirected if she'd known. He stopped at the doorway of the living room. Rosa saw him first. She startled, began to rise immediately. "Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry, my daughter. I can explain." "Don't get up." His voice was quiet, not commanding. Quiet in a different way, the way a person speaks when they're trying not to disturb something fragile and beautiful. Rosa froze. Nathaniel was looking at his children. Elijah had now migrated fully onto the rug and was attempting to color his own section, which mostly meant pressing the crayon very hard and making satisfying dark marks. Ezra had accepted a red crayon from Lily and was contributing to Gerald the son's growing family of friends. And Eden, had leaned her small head briefly, just briefly, against Lily's small shoulder, then straightened up again, as if she hadn't done it, as if she was too proud to admit she had. But she had done it, and Nathaniel had seen it. He stood there for so long that Rosa became uncomfortable. She searched for something to say, some professional reassurance that this was temporary, that Lily would be gone tomorrow, that it wouldn't happen again. But before she could speak, something happened that made all the words disappear from her head. Nathaniel Cole, billionaire, CEO, man whose time was billed in minutes, walked across the living room, lowered himself to the floor, and sat down. On the rug. In his $3,000 suit. Lily looked up at him. She evaluated him the way she'd evaluated Eden. That same frank, unimpressed 3-year-old assessment. "Do you want to color?" she asked. The tone clearly communicated that she was doing him a significant favor by even asking. Nathaniel blinked. Yes," he said. "I think I do." Lily handed him a blue crayon with the ceremony of someone passing a torch. And Nathaniel Cole, a man who had not sat on a floor in perhaps 20 years, held that blue crayon and looked at the page full of suns and colored marks and the beginnings of something none of his money had been able to build. His family. Eden looked at him sideways. That look, the architect's calculating look. And then, with enormous dignity, she scooted 1/2 an inch in his direction. It was the first time in weeks she had moved toward him voluntarily. Nathaniel's eyes filled. He bent his head over the coloring book so nobody would see. But his shoulders shook, just for a moment, and Rosa saw. Rosa looked away, giving him the privacy a dignified man needed in an undignified moment. "What would it take for you to sit on the floor and let a child hand you a crayon. They stayed there for an hour. An entire hour. Nathaniel's assistant called 3 times. He silenced his phone after the first. Gerald the son acquired approximately 40 friends. The rug received some crayon marks that would never fully come out. Nobody mentioned it. Lily held court the entire time, organizing colors, assigning Gerald's friends' names, occasionally placing her small hand on someone else's to guide their marks. Elijah, Eden, her own mother, even Nathaniel. Utterly unbothered by wealth or grief or complexity. She simply saw people who needed something to do with their hands and offered them crayons. When Lily finally announced she was hungry in a tone that suggested this was everyone else's problem to solve, Nathaniel stood and said, looking at Rosa, then looking at his children, "Would you and Lily join us for lunch?" The question was simple. Its weight was enormous. Rosa opened her mouth to decline, to say something professional about boundaries and positions and knowing her place. But Eden tugged her sleeve. Just once. Small fingers on Rosa's sleeve, not looking at her, pretending it hadn't happened. Rosa looked down, then looked up at Nathaniel. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." That lunch was supposed to be 1 hour. It became 3. Lily insisted on showing the triplets how she ate her crackers, in a specific order, big bites then small bites, apparently for reasons that made complete sense only to her. The triplets watched, replicated, failed, tried again. There was so much food on the floor by the end that the housekeeper had to work very hard to keep her expression professional. Nobody seemed to notice or care. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, a table that had been too long and too quiet for 2 years now, and watched his children eat. Together. At the table. Without throwing anything. That was new. He found himself watching Rosa too. The way she spoke to Lily, direct, warm, without the false brightness adults often use with small children. The way she handed Eden a napkin without making it a big deal when Eden made a mess. The way she somehow seemed to know, without being told, when Ezra needed more space and when Elijah needed more attention. She wasn't performing caregiving. She was just doing it. Naturally, the way some people are simply wired. After lunch, Rosa said she needed to get back to work. There were still rooms to finish. Lily could come with her. She'd set her up in the corner again. "She can stay," said Eden. Everyone at the table turned. Because Eden did not generally volunteer sentences. Especially not sentences that revealed what she wanted. Lily looked at Eden. Eden looked at Lily. Some agreement passed between them that adults in the room were not equipped to decode. "Okay," said Lily, and picked up another cracker. Eden looked at her plate, but the corner of her mouth moved upward. Barely. A ghost of something. Rosa looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel looked at Rosa. He cleared his throat. "The children's playroom is fully stocked. If Lily wanted to play there while you finish your work, someone could." "I'll keep the door open," Rosa said. "I can hear them." "That's not necessary." "I can. Mr. Cole." Her voice was gentle but clear. "It would be better if it were me." He paused, then nodded. Because she was right. And he knew she was right. And there was something profound and quietly painful in knowing that a woman he'd met 3 hours ago understood his children better, in this moment, than he did. Have you ever had to accept help from somewhere unexpected? Did you take it? Or did your pride get in the way? The afternoon moved the way good afternoons do, slowly, fully. Rosa cleaned. Through doorways and monitors, she kept one ear on the playroom, where the improbable had become ordinary, for toddlers playing. Messily, loudly, sometimes in conflict, Elijah staged what appeared to be a full coup over the block tower, which led to a brief but dramatic dispute, but together, working things out, in the way children do when they feel safe enough to have conflict, because conflict means you trust the other person isn't going to disappear. Nathaniel stayed home all afternoon. He told his assistant to clear his afternoon. She asked if everything was all right. He said yes and then paused and said, "Actually, yes. Things are all right." When Rosa began to pack up at 5 o'clock, collecting Lily's things, pulling on their coats, the goodbyes were complicated. Elijah clung to Lily's hand for longer than was convenient. Ezra handed her back the red crayon, and then appeared to change his mind and take it back, some internal toddler negotiation nobody else had access to. Eden stood at a distance, arms crossed, pretending to be indifferent and fooling absolutely nobody. At the door, Nathaniel said, "Will you come back?" Rosa looked at him. "I'm scheduled twice a week." "I mean," he stopped, recalibrated, a man and used to saying what he actually meant in personal situations. "Lily is welcome here. If your daycare situation is difficult." Rosa studied him for a moment. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Cole." "I have 17 empty nanny positions," he said, with a dryness that surprised her. She hadn't expected humor. "I have the space." Rosa almost smiled. "We'll see," she said. She put Lily on her hip and walked to the elevator. As the doors closed, she heard, faintly from down the hall, Eden's voice. "Lily come back?" And Nathaniel's voice, softer than Rosa had heard it all day. "Yes, baby. Lily will come back." Rosa pressed her face against Lily's small warm head in the elevator and exhaled everything she'd been holding all day. This is the part of the story I almost didn't tell, because it's the part that broke me a little, in the best way. Over the next 3 months, something quietly extraordinary happened in that hollow penthouse above the city. Rosa came twice a week. Lily came with her every time. Nathaniel stopped pretending this was a logistical arrangement and accepted what it actually was, something he could not have engineered with all his resources, something that had arrived the way real things do. Unplanned, unscheduled, irreversible. The triplets began to heal. Not all at once. Not cleanly. Grief in toddlers doesn't work like that. There were still hard days. Mornings when Eden wouldn't let anyone near her. Afternoons when Elijah would suddenly cry without knowing why. Evenings when Ezra went so still and quiet that it frightened everyone. But those days grew fewer. And in between them, there was more laughter. More mess. More of the noisy, chaotic, completely ungovernable joy that children are supposed to have. Nathaniel began to change too. He left his office earlier. He learned, slowly, imperfectly, to sit on the floor. He learned that he didn't need to have a plan when he walked into the playroom, that sometimes the best thing a parent can do is simply show up and be willing to be handed a crayon and told what to color. He and Rosa talked. During lunches that became a quiet ritual, after the children ate and scattered, while the apartment settled into the good exhaustion that follows real play. They talked carefully at first, the way people do when they're not sure what they're allowed to say. Then less carefully. Then the way people talk when they trust each other. He told her about Clara, about the balloons, about the particular agony of missing someone who is also looking at you through your children's eyes every single day. Rosa told him about her sister, about Lily's first year, which had been terrifying and lonely, and also the most clarifying year of her life. The year she understood what she was actually made of. They were different in almost every measurable way. Wealth, background, education, position. But grief has a way of making people level. Loss speaks a language everyone understands. One evening, Nathaniel asked Rosa if she would consider a different arrangement. Not cleaning twice a week. Something else. A real position. Overseeing the children's care, with real pay, real hours, real security. He said it carefully, aware of the fragility of what they'd built, not wanting to make it transactional, not wanting to make her feel like an employee where something warmer had been growing. Rosa was quiet for a long time. "I want you to understand something," she said finally. "Lily isn't a strategy. She's a child. She has good days and hard days. She's going to grow up, and she's going to change, and she can't be anyone's solution." "I know," Nathaniel said. "I'm not asking for a solution. I'm asking you to stay. Because this." He gestured, not at the apartment, but at something harder to name. "This feels like the beginning of something I don't want to lose." Rosa looked at the doorway where, an hour ago, Eden had taken Lily's hand and pulled her toward the toy shelves with the silent authority of someone who had decided the other person now belonged in their world. "Okay," Rosa said. "We'll stay." But here is what nobody knew. Not even Rosa, fully, until much later. The night before Rosa had first come to work at Nathaniel's penthouse, the night she'd gotten the call from the agency, she had been sitting at her kitchen table doing the math that never added up. Bills. Childcare. Hours. The numbers didn't work. She'd been considering giving up the apartment and moving somewhere smaller, somewhere cheaper, somewhere that would mean pulling Lily out of her daycare entirely and starting over. She had been in the most private corner of her heart, close to breaking. And then the agency had called. A last-minute position. A penthouse. Good pay. Lily could come if there was truly no other option. She had thought she was walking in to clean someone's floors. She had walked in to change for lives, including her own. And Lily, 3 years old, with her box of crayons and her son named Gerald, and her complete indifference to the fact that the people around her were wounded, Lily had simply done what children do when they haven't yet learned to be afraid of other people's pain. She had sat down next to it. She had offered a crayon. She had said, "Here, this is Gerald's friend. You can help color it." And somehow, in that impossible, simple, unrepeatable way, that had been exactly enough. 2 years later, Nathaniel stood at a window watching 4 children play in a garden he had built on the penthouse terrace. Elijah was staging some elaborate game that involved a lot of running and unclear rules. Ezra was sitting apart, watching, occasionally contributing a single decisive action that seemed to reset the game entirely. Eden was directing. And Lily, 5 years old now, taller, louder, Bossier, was in the middle of all of it, coloring book abandoned somewhere in the grass, hands full of something, laughing. Rosa came to stand beside him. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "She saved them, you know." Rosa watched Lily tackle Elijah in a move that was definitely against whatever rules the game had. "She just sat next to them," she said. "That's what saving looks like," he said. Rosa thought about her kitchen table. The bills. The numbers that never worked. The phone call she'd almost missed because she'd been in the bathroom crying. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is the simplest. Not a degree. Not a strategy. Not money. Not expertise. Just a small child with a crayon, willing to sit next to someone who is hurting and say, 'Here, you can have this color. We can make something together.' We spend so much of our lives building walls, around our grief, around our pride, around our need. We hire experts to solve what only presence can heal. We look everywhere for the answer except in the quiet, uncomplicated act of just showing up and being willing to be there. Lily didn't fix those children. She reminded them that the world was still safe enough to sit in. That's all. And it was everything. Maybe someone in your life just needs you to sit next to them. Not to fix it. Not to explain it. Not to manage it. Just to sit there. And hand them a crayon. And say, 'This can be Gerald's friend.'" Here's the question I want you to carry with you today. Who in your life has been waiting for you to simply sit next to them? And what has been stopping you? If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of it, I read every single one. Drop a if Lily made you feel something. Drop a if you believe the simplest things change the most lives. Hit that button. We tell stories here that don't let go of you. That's a promise. And if you want more, it will stop you in your tracks the same way this one did. Thank you for staying till the end. Honestly, thank you. Not everyone does. The ones who do are the ones who still believe stories matter. And they do.